Bliss Land, Glimpses of Cosmic Consciousness. Edited with introduction by David Christopher Lane. Narrated by Taylor Roark. You are an explorer, and you represent our species, and the greatest good you can do is to bring back a new idea, because our world is endangered by the absence of good ideas. Our world is in crisis because of the absence of consciousness. Terence McKenna. Chapter 1. Bliss Land. When my youngest son, Kelly, was 4, he used to ask the most intriguing and surprisingly mature philosophical questions. The one query, however, that made me think the deepest, and the one that he cared most about, concerned death and the afterlife. Kelly wanted to know what happened when we died. I had a number of options before me on how to respond. There was the materialist response, which at first hearing sounds the harshest. You become fertilizer. Then there is the more cliched reply, usually invoked by those belonging to Christianity or Islam. Good boys go to heaven or paradise. Of course, there is always the most honest rejoinder. Nobody actually knows. However, I didn't choose any of those answers. Instead, I said, we all go to Bliss Land. Kelly looked at me a bit incredulous, most likely because he didn't actually know what the term bliss actually meant. I then went on to explain my position. The happiest moments of our lives, I suggested, were when we lose our sense of self, our sense of isolation, our contractedness. I used surfing as my guiding metaphor to provide a more concrete illustration to my young son, who was also a budding waterman. Whenever I catch a good wave surfing or body surfing, I lose myself in the moment. I become keenly aware of the drop, the bottom turn, the throwing lip, and the projective line down at the shoulder. Without thinking, I become the process itself, and time slows down. And if I'm lucky, I get to tuck into a tube and see a cascading curtain of water envelop around me. It may last but 2 or 3 seconds, but because my awareness is right there and locked into the subtlest of blue and green textures and the rushing sound of vacuuming water, it has a timelessness to it. Kelly looks up at me, realizing that I got lost in my storytelling as I relived the many waves I have caught in my life. But he persists. I don't get it, Papa. I then tried a different route. Kelly, when were you happiest? It took him a few moments of reflection, and he exclaimed, when we went to Hawaii this summer. What was it about that trip that you remember? Ah, Kelly recalled, that's easy. It was when I saw the blue water for the first time and smelled the ocean. It was exhilarating. I was overwhelmed by the beauty of it. My son's reminiscence made me think of that famous episode in the life of the visionary mystic saint, Sri Ramakrishna, who as a young Indian boy falls into a state of ecstasy while walking in a village field in Bengal, India, during the mid-part of the 19th century, when all of a sudden he sees a black rain cloud and then majestically a flock of white cranes flying in the sky. The juxtaposition of the two opposite colors was overwhelmingly beautiful. The very sight sent him into samadhi, divine ecstasy, and he fell unconscious. While my surfing adventures and Kelly's wonder at Waikiki's gorgeous setting is not the same as Ramakrishna's samadhi, they do share something fundamental in common. Beauty and our focused attention can awaken in us something utterly profound. It can be stated very simply, even if it sounds like a Zen koan. We are happiest when we are not ourselves. That is, we feel the bliss of our existence when we are not trapped in our own narcissism. Sam Harris, the well-known neuroscientist who has written what I consider the most reasonable book ever published on meditation, Waking Up, makes a very cogent argument that what we believe to be our self is, on closer inspection, nothing but an evolutionary trick, an illusion without substance. In an interview with Gary Gutting, Harris explains his position by using a very clever visual illusion. Gary Gutting, GG. You deny the existence of the self, understood as an inner subject thinking our thoughts and experiencing our experiences. You say further that the experience of meditation, as practiced, for example, in Buddhism, shows that there is no self. But you also admit that we all feel like an internal self at almost every waking moment. Why should a relatively rare and deliberately cultivated experience of no self trump this almost constant feeling of a self? Sam Harris, S.H. Because what does not survive scrutiny cannot be real. Perhaps you can see the same effect in this perceptual illusion. It certainly looks like there is a white square in the center of this figure, but when we study the image, it becomes clear that there are only 4 partial circles. The square has been imposed by our visual system, whose edge detectors have been fooled. Can we know that the black shapes are more real than the white one? Yes, because the square doesn't survive our efforts to locate it. Its edges literally disappear. A little investigation and we see that its form has been merely implied. What could we say to a skeptic who insisted that the white square is just as real as the 3/4 circles, and that its disappearance is nothing more than, as you say, a relatively rare and deliberately cultivated experience? All we could do is urge him to look more closely. The same is true about the conventional sense of self. The feeling of being a subject inside your head, a locus of consciousness behind your eyes, a thinker in addition to the flow of thoughts. This form of subjectivity does not survive scrutiny. If you really look for what you are calling I, this feeling will disappear. In fact, it is easier to experience consciousness without the feeling of self than it is to banish the white square in the above image. Whenever we look within to the source of our own consciousness, we don't find it with a beginning or with an end. It just is. To rest in that very space, what the Buddhists have termed sunyata, or emptiness, is to be free from the conceptual and limiting frameworks that arrest our awareness. This option is always with us and is never absent, even if it may be more difficult to access due to mitigating circumstances. The term cosmic consciousness is fraught with difficulties, particularly since there isn't a universal definition of what it actually means. However, for purposes of this edited book, I mean a transcendent experience whereby one is lifted out and beyond their normal waking state awareness, where one feels unbounded, liberated, and one with that which is trans-self, transpersonal. Richard Maurice Buck, 1837 to 1902, a noted psychiatrist from Canada, is responsible for popularizing the term cosmic consciousness when he wrote about the subject in a book of the same title that was published in 1901, just 1 year before his death. However, he apparently learned of the 2-word phrase from Edward Carpenter, 1844 to 1929, a radical thinker for his time who advocated vegetarianism, socialism, and Indian philosophy. Both used the term to denote a universalism, a leap beyond the merely personal, where one touched upon a realm above the merely finite. Of course, the conceptual idea, and more importantly, the very core of the experience, is not a new one, since almost all cultures and all religions touch upon some aspect of going beyond oneself and experiencing the sacred. Rudolf Otto wrote a whole thesis on the subject in his now justly famous and still widely read text, The Idea of the Holy, wherein he writes, "We are dealing with something for which there is only one appropriate expression, mysterium tremendum. The feeling of it may at times come sweeping like a gentle tide, pervading the mind with a tranquil mood of deepest worship. It may pass over into a more set and lasting attitude of the soul, continuing, as it were, thrillingly vibrant and resonant, until at last it dies away, and the soul resumes its profane, non-religious mood of everyday experience. It has its crude, barbaric antecedents and early manifestations, and again it may be developed into something beautiful and pure and glorious. It may become the hushed, trembling, and speechless humility of the creature in the presence of whom or what? In the presence of that which is a mystery inexpressible and above all creatures." I suspect we all have had mystical glimpses which we cannot codify into words. Some individuals, though, have had such numinous experiences that they go beyond the border of the normal or the expected and reach realms unseen and unheard by most of us. These include transformative near-death experiences, deep meditational transports, and the wildly unanticipated ruptures that occur randomly and seemingly out of nowhere, which happened to Ramakrishna as a young boy. Perhaps one of the most famous such awakenings occurred to Ramana Maharshi, 1878 to 1950, of South India when he was just a teenager, though his enlightenment appears to have been a permanent change and not a temporary insight. As Ramana recounted, "It was about 6 weeks before I left Madura for good that a great change in my life took place. It was quite sudden. I was sitting in a room on the first floor of my uncle's house. I seldom had any sickness, and on that day there was nothing wrong with my health, but a sudden, violent fear of death overtook me. There was nothing in my state of health to account for it, and I did not try to account for it or to find out whether there was any reason for the fear. I just felt, I am going to die, and began thinking what to do about it. It did not occur to me to consult a doctor or my elders or friends. I felt that I had to solve the problem myself, then and there. The shock of the fear of death drove my mind inwards, and I said to myself mentally, without actually framing the words, 'Now death has come. What does it mean? What is it that is dying? This body dies.' And I at once dramatized the occurrence of death. I lay with my limbs stretched out stiff, as though rigor mortis had set in, and imitated a corpse so as to give greater reality to the inquiry. I held my breath and kept my lips tightly closed, so that no sound could escape, so that neither the word "I" or any other word could be uttered. Well then, I said to myself, this body is dead. It will be carried stiff to the burning ground, and there burnt and reduced to ashes. But with the death of this body, am I dead? Is the body I? It is silent and inert, but I feel the force of my personality and even the voice of the I within me, apart from it. So I am spirit, transcending the body. The body dies, but the spirit that transcends it cannot be touched by death. This means I am the deathless spirit. All this was not dull thought. It flashed through me vividly as living truth, which I perceived directly, almost without thought process. I was something very real, the only real thing about my present state, and all the conscious activity connected with my body was centered on that I. From that moment onwards, the I, or self, focused attention on itself by a powerful fascination. Fear of death had vanished once and for all. Absorption in the self continued unbroken from that time on. Other thoughts might come and go like the various notes of music, but the I continued like the fundamental Shruti note that underlies and blends with all the other notes. Whether the body was engaged in talking, reading, or anything else, I was still centered on I. Previous to that crisis, I had no clear perception of myself and was not consciously attracted to it. I felt no perceptible or direct interest in it, much less any inclination to dwell permanently in it. It is here that we need to pause and be careful of how we classify such a diverse set of transpersonal experiences, since each are unique in their own way. To be sure, we can find commonalities, but far too often in our rush for a Huxley-like perennial philosophy, we neglect the important biographical, and it must be said biological, nuances that flavor and shape one's numinous excursions. While many of us have had nature-related bliss moments, from surfing to mountain climbing to secluded walks in the forest, where we had ecstatic occasions, it may be too long a stretch to argue that these are on par with what mystics of time immemorial have described. Yet I don't think the expansion of consciousness, cosmic or otherwise, is an either-or proposition, but rather represents a continuum, and that we do a disservice by collapsing such a spectrum of possibilities by prematurely categorizing them into prepackaged theological overlays. They are part and parcel of what it is like to be a human being. How we ultimately interpret them, neurologically or religiously, is secondary to the value of the experiences themselves, and what the wider aspects they offer us about our own self-reflective awareness. I must confess, however, that I do find that meditative practices, especially as developed in India, which has a long tradition of allowing a fuller exploration of subjective states of being, to be of elemental importance in eliciting glimpses of higher, more far-reaching forms of consciousness. But meditation as a method is predicated upon how we focus our attention. Change our focus, and we change the worlds we inhabit, at least in terms of how we subjectively experience them. The following volume is an idiosyncratic collection of personal reports which give but a peek into what has been poetically termed cosmic consciousness. Keep in mind, however, that not all noetic glimpses are the same, since each represents different facets of what is mystically possible for us to achieve. Each in their own way provide a couloir into Bliss Land, a region that all humans desire, and which, given the right circumstances and conditions, is available to every human being. It is not that the transcendent arrives after death, as in a heaven or a nirvana or paradise, but rather that it is always a current opening wherever we find ourselves. A drop in an ocean doesn't have to go anywhere to find the sea from which it arises. No, it simply looks within and surrenders to that ever-expansive mystery. It is also not an achievement of something, or gaining, or an adding on to reality. To the contrary, it is our own nature that is forever there, and as such, is forever inescapable. Ramana clearly understood this secret of the bubble and the ocean when he wrote, "There is no greater mystery than this, that we keep seeking reality, though in fact, we are reality. We think that there is something hiding reality, and that this must be destroyed before reality is gained. How ridiculous! A day will dawn when you will laugh at all your past efforts. That which will be the day you laugh is also here and now." Chapter 2. Cosmic Consciousness, from Richard Maurice Buck. It was in the early spring, at the beginning of his 36th year. He and two friends had spent the evening reading Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats, Browning, and especially Whitman. They parted at midnight, and he had a long drive in a hansom. It was in an English city. His mind, deeply under the influence of the ideas, images, and emotions called up by the reading and talk of the evening, was calm and peaceful. He was in a state of quiet, almost passive enjoyment. All at once, without warning of any kind, he found himself wrapped around, as it were, by a flame-colored cloud. For an instant he thought of fire, some sudden conflagration in the great city. The next, he knew that the light was within himself. Directly afterwards came upon him a sense of exaltation, of immense joyousness, accompanied or immediately followed by an intellectual illumination quite impossible to describe. Into his brain streamed one momentary lightning flash of the Brahmic splendor which has ever since lightened his life. Upon his heart fell one drop of Brahmic bliss, leaving thenceforward for always an aftertaste of heaven. Among other things he did not come to believe, he saw and knew that the cosmos is not dead matter, but a living presence, that the soul of man is immortal, that the universe is so built and ordered that without any peradventure all things work together for the good of each and all, that the foundation principle of the world is what we call love, and that the happiness of everyone is in the long run absolutely certain. He claims that he learned more within the few seconds during which the illumination lasted than in previous months or even years of study, and that he learned much that no study could ever have taught. The illumination itself continued not more than a few moments, but its effects proved ineffaceable. It was impossible for him ever to forget what he at that time saw and knew. Neither did he or could he ever doubt the truth of what was then presented to his mind. There was no return, that night or at any other time, of the experience. He subsequently wrote a book in which he sought to embody the teaching of the illumination. Some who read it thought very highly of it, but, as was to be expected for many reasons, it had little circulation. The supreme occurrence of that night was his real and sole initiation to the new and higher order of ideas, but it was only an initiation. He saw the light, but had no more idea whence it came and what it meant than had the first creature that saw the light of the sun. Years afterwards, he met C.P., of whom he had often heard as having extraordinary spiritual insight. He found that C.P. had entered the higher life of which he had had a glimpse, and had had large experience of its phenomena. His conversation with C.P. threw a flood of light upon the true meaning of what he had himself experienced. Looking round then upon the world of man, he saw the significance of the subjective light in the case of Paul and in that of Mohammed. The secret of Whitman's transcendent greatness was revealed to him. Certain conversations with J.H.J. and with J.B. helped him not a little. Personal intercourse with Edward Carpenter, T.S.R., C.M.C., and M.C.L. assisted greatly in the broadening and clearing up of his speculations, in the extension and coordination of his thought. But much time and labor were still required before the germinal concept could be satisfactorily elaborated and matured. The idea, namely, that there exists a family sprung from, living among, but scarcely forming a part of ordinary humanity, whose members are spread abroad throughout the advanced races of mankind and throughout the last 40 centuries of the world's history. The trait that distinguishes these people from other men is this: their spiritual eyes have been opened, and they have seen. The better-known members of this group who, were they collected together, could be accommodated all at one time in a modern drawing-room, have created all the great modern religions, beginning with Taoism and Buddhism, and speaking generally, have created, through religion and literature, modern civilization. Not that they have contributed any large numerical proportion of the books which have been written, but that they have produced the few books which have inspired the larger number of all that have been written in modern times. These men dominate the last 25, especially the last 5 centuries, as stars of the first magnitude dominate the midnight sky. A man is identified as a member of this family by the fact that, at a certain age, he has passed through a new birth and risen to a higher spiritual plane. The reality of the new birth is demonstrated by the subjective light and other phenomena. The object of the present volume is to teach others what little the writer himself has been able to learn of the spiritual status of this new race. Chapter 3. An Experience of Cosmic Consciousness. Excerpt from Paramahansa Yogananda. I am here, Guruji. My shamefacedness spoke more eloquently for me. Let us go to the kitchen and find something to eat. Sri Yukteswar's manner was as natural as if hours and not days had separated us. Master, I must have disappointed you by my abrupt departure from my duties here. I thought you might be angry with me. No, of course not. Wrath springs only from thwarted desires. I do not expect anything from others, so their actions cannot be in opposition to wishes of mine. I would not use you for my own ends. I am happy only in your own true happiness. Sir, one hears of divine love in a vague way, but for the first time I am having a concrete example in your angelic self. In the world, even a father does not easily forgive his son if he leaves his parents' business without warning. But you show not the slightest vexation, though you must have been put to great inconvenience by the many unfinished tasks I left behind. We looked into each other's eyes, where tears were shining. A blissful wave engulfed me. I was conscious that the Lord, in the form of my Guru, was expanding the small ardors of my heart into the incompressible reaches of cosmic love. A few mornings later, I made my way to Master's empty sitting room. I planned to meditate, but my laudable purpose was unshared by disobedient thoughts. They scattered like birds before the hunter. Mukunda, Sri Yukteswar's voice sounded from a distant inner balcony. I felt as rebellious as my thoughts. Master always urges me to meditate, I muttered to myself. He should not disturb me when he knows why I came to his room. He summoned me again. I remained obstinately silent. The third time his tone held rebuke. Sir, I am meditating, I shouted protestingly. I know how you are meditating, my Guru called out, with your mind distributed like leaves in a storm. Come here to me. Snubbed and exposed, I made my way sadly to his side. Poor boy, the mountains couldn't give what you wanted. Master spoke caressively, comfortingly. His calm gaze was unfathomable. Your heart's desire shall be fulfilled. Sri Yukteswar seldom indulged in riddles. I was bewildered. He struck gently on my chest, above the heart. My body became immovably rooted. Breath was drawn out of my lungs as if by some huge magnet. Soul and mind instantly lost their physical bondage and streamed out like a fluid piercing light from my every pore. The flesh was as though dead, yet in my intense awareness, I knew that never before had I been fully alive. My sense of identity was no longer narrowly confined to a body, but embraced the circumambient atoms. People on distant streets seemed to be moving gently over my own remote periphery. The roots of plants and trees appeared through a dim transparency of the soil. I discerned the inward flow of their sap. The whole vicinity lay bare before me. My ordinary frontal vision was now changed to a vast spherical sight, simultaneously all perceptive. Through the back of my head, I saw men strolling far down Raigat Road, and noticed also a white cow who was leisurely approaching. When she reached the space in front of the open ashram gate, I observed her with my 2 physical eyes. As she passed by, behind the brick wall, I saw her clearly still. All objects within my panoramic gaze trembled and vibrated like quick motion pictures. My body, Masters, the pillared courtyard, the furniture and floor, the trees and sunshine, occasionally became violently agitated until all melted into a luminescent sea, even as sugar crystals thrown into a glass of water dissolve after being shaken. The unifying light alternated with materializations of form, the metamorphoses revealing the law of cause and effect in creation. An oceanic joy broke upon calm, endless shores of my soul. The Spirit of God, I realized, is exhaustless bliss. His body is countless tissues of light. A swelling glory within me began to envelop towns, continents, the earth, solar and stellar systems, tenuous nebulae, and floating universes. The entire cosmos, gently luminous, like a city seen afar at night, glimmered within the infinitude of my being. The sharply etched global outlines faded somewhat at the farthest edges. There I could see a mellow radiance, ever undiminished. It was indescribably subtle. The planetary pictures were formed of a grosser light. The divine dispersion of rays poured from an eternal source, blazing into galaxies, transfigured with ineffable auras. Again and again I saw the creative beams condense into constellations, then resolve into sheets of transparent flame. By rhythmic reversion, sextillion worlds passed into diaphanous luster. Fire became firmament. I cognized the center of the Empyrean as a point of intuitive perception in my heart. Irradiating splendor issued from my nucleus to every part of the universal structure. Blissful Amrita, the nectar of immortality, pulsed through me with a quicksilver-like fluidity. The creative voice of God I heard resounding as Aum, the vibration of the cosmic motor. Suddenly the breath returned to my lungs. With a disappointment almost unbearable, I realized that my infinite immensity was lost. Once more I was limited to the humiliating cage of a body, not easily accommodative to the spirit. Like a prodigal child, I had run away from my macrocosmic home and imprisoned myself in a narrow microcosm. My guru was standing motionless before me. I started to drop at his holy feet in gratitude for the experience in cosmic consciousness which I had long passionately sought. He held me upright and spoke calmly, unpretentiously. You must not get overdrunk with ecstasy. Much work yet remains for you in the world. Come, let us sweep the balcony floor. Then we shall walk by the Ganges. I fetched a broom. Master, I knew, was teaching me the secret of balanced living. The soul must stretch over the cosmogonic abysses while the body performs its daily duties. When we set out later for a stroll, I was still entranced in unspeakable rapture. I saw our bodies as 2 astral pictures, moving over a road by the river whose essence was sheer light. It is the Spirit of God that actively sustains every form and force in the universe. Yet He is transcendental and aloof in the blissful, uncreated void beyond the world's vibratory phenomena, Master explained. Saints who realize their divinity even while in the flesh know a similar 2-fold existence. conscientiously engaging in earthly work, they yet remain immersed in an inward beatitude. The Lord has created all men from the limitless joy of His being. Though they are painfully cramped by the body, God nevertheless expects that souls made in His image shall ultimately rise above all sense identifications and reunite with Him. The cosmic vision left many permanent lessons. By daily stilling my thoughts, I could win release from the delusive conviction that my body was a mass of flesh and bones, traversing the hard soil of matter. The breath and the restless mind I saw were like storms which lashed the ocean of light into waves of material forms: earth, sky, human beings, animals, birds, trees. No perception of the infinite as one light could be had except by calming those storms. As often as I silenced the two natural tumults, I beheld the multitudinous waves of creation melt into one lucent sea. Even as the waves of the ocean, their tempests subsiding, serenely dissolve into unity. A master bestows the divine experience of cosmic consciousness when his disciple, by meditation, has strengthened his mind to a degree where the vast vistas would not overwhelm him. The experience can never be given through one's mere intellectual willingness or open-mindedness. Only adequate enlargement by yoga practice and devotional bhakti can prepare the mind to absorb the liberating shock of omnipresence. It comes with a natural inevitability to the sincere devotee. His intense craving begins to pull at God with an irresistible force. The Lord, as the cosmic vision, is drawn by the seeker's magnetic ardor into his range of consciousness. I wrote in my later years the following poem, Samadhi, endeavoring to convey the glory of its cosmic state. Vanished the veils of light and shade, lifted every vapor of sorrow, sailed away all dawns of fleeting joy, gone the dim sensory mirage. Love, hate, health, disease, life, death. Perished these false shadows on the screen of duality. Waves of laughter, scillas of sarcasm, melancholic whirlpools, melting in the vast sea of bliss. The storm of Maya stilled by magic wand of intuition deep. The universe, forgotten dream, subconsciously lurks, ready to invade my newly wakened memory divine. I live without the cosmic shadow, but it is not, bereft of me. As the sea exists without the waves, but they breathe not without the sea. Dreams, wakings, states of deep turiya sleep, present, past, future, no more for me, but ever present, all flowing, I, everywhere. Planets, stars, stardust, earth, volcanic bursts of doomsday cataclysms, creation's molding furnace, glaciers of silent X-rays, burning electron floods, thoughts of all men, past, present, to come, every blade of grass, myself, mankind, each particle of universal dust, anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, lust. I swallowed, transmuted all into a vast ocean of blood of my own one being. Smoldering joy, oft puffed by meditation, blinding my tearful eyes, burst into immortal flames of bliss, consumed my tears, my frame, my all. Thou art I am thou, knowing, knower, known, as one. Tranquiled, unbroken thrill, eternally living, ever new peace, enjoyable beyond imagination of expectancy, samadhi, bliss. Not an unconscious state or mental chloroform without willful return. Samadhi but extends my conscious realm beyond limits of the mortal frame to farthest boundary of eternity, where I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. The sparrow, each grain of sand, fall not without my sight. All space floats like an iceberg in my mental sea, colossal container, I of all things made. By deeper, longer, thirsty, guru-given meditation comes this celestial samadhi. Mobile murmurs of atoms are heard, the dark earth, mountains, vales, low, molten liquid. Flowing seas change into vapors of nebulae. Aum blows upon vapors, opening wondrously their veils. Oceans stand revealed, shining electrons, till, at last sound of the cosmic drum, vanish the grosser lights into eternal rays of all-pervading bliss. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt. Ocean of mind, I drink all creation's waves. 4 veils of solid, liquid, vapor, light. Lift aright. Myself in everything enters the great myself. Gone forever, fitful, flickering shadows of mortal memory. Spotless is my mental sky, below, ahead, and high above. Eternity and I, one united ray. A tiny bubble of laughter, I am become the sea of mirth itself. Sri Yukteswar taught me how to summon the blessed experience at will, and also how to transmit it to others if their intuitive channels were developed. For months I entered the ecstatic union, comprehending why the Upanishads say God is rasa, the most relishable. One day, however, I took a problem to master. I want to know, sir, when shall I find God? You have found him. Oh no, sir, I don't think so. My guru was smiling. I am sure you aren't expecting a venerable personage, adorning a throne in some antiseptic corner of the cosmos. I see, however, that you are imagining that the possession of miraculous powers is knowledge of God. One might have the whole universe and find the Lord elusive still. Spiritual advancement is not measured by one's outward powers, but only by the depth of his bliss in meditation. Ever new joy is God. He is inexhaustible. As you continue your meditations during the years, He will beguile you with an infinite ingenuity. Devotees like yourself, who have found the way to God, never dream of exchanging Him for any other happiness. He is seductive, beyond thought of competition. How quickly we weary of earthly pleasures. Desire for material things is endless. Man is never satisfied completely, and pursues one goal after another. The something else he seeks is the Lord, who alone can grant lasting joy. Outward longings drive us from the Eden within. They offer false pleasures, which only impersonate soul happiness. The lost paradise is quickly regained through divine meditation. As God is unanticipatory ever-newness, we never tire of Him. Can we be surfeited with bliss, delightfully varied throughout eternity? I understand now, sir, why saints call the Lord unfathomable. Even everlasting life could not suffice to appraise him. That is true, but he is also near and dear. After the mind has been cleared by Kriya Yoga of sensory obstacles, meditation furnishes a twofold proof of God. Ever-new joy is evidence of his existence, convincing to our very atoms. Also, in meditation one finds his instant guidance, his adequate response to every difficulty. I see, Guruji, you have solved my problem. I smiled gratefully. I do realize now that I have found God, for whenever the joy of meditation has returned subconsciously during my active hours, I have been subtly directed to adopt the right course in everything, even details. Human life is beset with sorrow until we know how to tune in with the divine will, whose right course is often baffling to the egoistic intelligence. God bears the burden of the cosmos. He alone can give unerring counsel. Endnote 14:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John, chapter 1, verse 1. Endnote 14:2. For the Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son. John, chapter 5, verse 22. No man hath seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. John, chapter 1, verse 18. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. John, chapter 14, verse 12. But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things, and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said to you. John, chapter 14, verse 26. These biblical words refer to the threefold nature of God as Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Sat, Tat, Aum in the Hindu scriptures. God the Father is the absolute, unmanifested, existing beyond vibratory creation. God the Son is the Christ consciousness, Brahma or Kutastha Chaitanya, existing within vibratory creation. This Christ consciousness is the only begotten or sole reflection of the uncreated infinite. Its outward manifestation or witness is Aum or Holy Ghost, the divine, creative, invisible power which structures all creation through vibration. Aum, the blissful comforter, is heard in meditation and reveals to the devotee the ultimate truth. Chapter 4. J. A. Simons and the Abstract Self. Excerpted by William James in The Varieties of Religious Experience. Writes William James, a much more extreme state of mystical consciousness is described by J. A. Simons, and probably more persons than we suspect could give parallels to it from their own experience. Suddenly, writes Simons, at church or in company or when I was reading, and always, I think, when my muscles were at rest, I felt the approach of the mood. Irresistibly it took possession of my mind and will, lasted what seemed an eternity, and disappeared in a series of rapid sensations which resembled the awakening from anesthetic influence. One reason why I disliked this kind of trance was that I could not describe it to myself. I cannot even now find words to render it intelligible. It consisted in a gradual but swiftly progressive obliteration of space, time, sensation, and the multitudinous factors of experience which seem to qualify what we are pleased to call our self. In proportion as these conditions of ordinary consciousness were subtracted, the sense of an underlying or essential consciousness acquired intensity. At last, nothing remained but a pure, absolute, abstract self. The universe became without form and void of content, but self persisted, formidable in its vivid keenness, feeling the most poignant doubt about reality, ready as it seemed to find existence break as breaks a bubble round about it. And what then? The apprehension of a coming disillusion, the grim conviction that this state was the last state of the conscious self, the sense that I had followed the last thread of being to the verge of the abyss, and had arrived at demonstration of eternal Maya, or illusion, stirred or seemed to stir me up again. The return to ordinary conditions of sentient existence began by my first recovering the power of touch, and then by the gradual though rapid influx of familiar impressions and diurnal interests. At last I felt myself once more a human being, and though the riddle of what is meant by life remained unsolved, I was thankful for this return from the abyss, this deliverance from so awful an initiation into the mysteries of skepticism. This trance recurred with diminishing frequency until I reached the age of 28. It served to impress upon my growing nature the phantasmal unreality of all the circumstances which contribute to a merely phenomenal consciousness. Often have I asked myself with anguish, on waking from that formless state of denuded, keenly sentient being, which is the unreality? The trance of fiery, vacant, apprehensive, skeptical self from which I issue? Or these surrounding phenomena and habits which veil that inner self, and build a self of flesh and blood conventionality? Again, are men the factors of some dream, the dreamlike unsubstantiality of which they comprehend at such eventful moments? What would happen if the final stage of the trance were reached? Chapter 5. John Wren Lewis's Near-Death Experience. Excerpted from Lotus Feet of Clay. What happened in 1983 would nowadays be called a near-death experience, or NDE, though it differed in several notable ways from most of those I'd read about in the rapidly growing literature on this topic, which I had incidentally dismissed as yet another manifestation of the mind's capacity for fantasy. In the first place, I had none of the dramatic visions which have hit the headlines in popular journalism and occupy a prominent place even in serious scholarly studies like Raymond Moody's Life After Life and Kenneth Ring's Life at Death. As I lay in the hospital bed in Thailand, after eating a poisoned sweet given me by a would-be thief, I had no out-of-body awareness of the doctors wondering if I was beyond saving, no review of my life, no passage down a dark tunnel to emerge into a heavenly light or landscape, and no encounter with angelic beings or deceased relatives telling me to go back because my work on earth wasn't yet finished. I simply entered, or rather was, a timeless, spaceless void, which in some indescribable way was total aliveness, an almost palpable blackness that was yet somehow radiant. Trying to find words for it afterwards, I recalled the mysterious line of Henry Vaughan's poem, The Night. There is in God, some say, a deep but dazzling darkness. Rereading the NDE reports collected by Moody, Ring, and others many months later, I found some accounts with echoes of my experience, but in nearly all the near-death literature, even the most blissful darkness experience seems to be regarded as a preliminary stage before transition, with or without the famous tunnel, into light. The condition I entered, on the other hand, seemed so complete in itself that light would have been quite superfluous. An even more marked difference from the general run of near-death experiences, however, was that I had absolutely no sense of regret or loss in coming back from this joy beyond joy, this peace past understanding, into physical life. In fact, my experience as the hospital's ministrations restored the body's vital signs was nothing like a return. It was more like an act of creation, whereby the timeless, spaceless dark budded out into manifestation, and what manifested was simply not the same me experiencing the world that I'd known before. It was everything that is, experiencing itself through the body-mind called John, lying in a hospital bed. And the experience was indescribably wonderful. I now know exactly why the book of Genesis says that God looked upon all that he had made, not just beautiful sunsets, but dreary hospital rooms and traumatized 60-year-old bodies, and saw that it was very good. What I am trying to describe, and have attempted to describe in fuller detail elsewhere, is no vague feeling of good to be alive. On the contrary, I no longer cared if John lived or ceased to be altogether. And the change of consciousness was so palpable that, to begin with, I repeatedly put my hand up to the back of my head, feeling exactly as if the doctors had removed the skull and exposed my brain somehow to the infinite blackness of space. Occasionally I still do so, for the new consciousness has remained with me ever since, which is the third and most significant difference from what happens in the general run of near-death experiences, and also from the altered states experienced with psychedelics. This is in no sense a high from which I can come down. The sense of awe-full wonders has at the same time a feeling of utter obviousness and ordinariness, as if the marvel of everything coming into being continuously from the great dark was no more and no less than just the way things are. From this perspective, the term altered state of consciousness would be a complete misnomer, for the state is one of simple normality. It seems rather as if my earlier state, so-called ordinary human consciousness, represents the real alteration, a deviation from the plain norm, a kind of artificially blinkered or clouded condition wherein the body-mind has the absurd illusion that it is somehow a separate individual entity over against everything else. In fact, I now understand why mystics of all religions have likened the enlightenment process to waking up from a dream. But even so, I had no thought, to begin with, that the awakening could be other than a temporary glimpse of reality, which would all be gone by morning. So powerful was this expectation that the next day I spent several hours packing up to leave the hospital and deciding where to go next in precisely the old way, as if I were an isolated individual coping with his environment after a very interesting experience the night before. Only as I was walking in the hot sun to the police station to report the crime was I struck by the sense of loss that the dark was missing, and my first thought then was, "Ah well, you've had the vision. I suppose now you'll have to join the ranks of all those seekers who spend their lives trying to attain higher consciousness." And then, to my amazement, I suddenly saw it was all still there, just waiting, as it were, to be noticed. The dark behind my eyes and behind everything else, bringing again the perception that, of course, everything exists by emerging fresh-minded from the dark, now and now, with a shout of joy, yet also in absolute calm. And still I thought it must all fade away soon. Only after the whole cycle of drifting off and snapping back again had been repeated several times a day, for some weeks did my mind start getting round to the fact that I might not be going to revert to the old, permanently clouded condition. The NDE had evidently jerked me out of the so-called normal human state of chronic illusion of separateness into a basic wakefulness interrupted by spells of dozing off, simply forgetting the dark until the sense of something missing from life brings about instant reawakening with no effort at all. I apparently wasn't destined to become a seeker in any ordinary sense. I'd been handed the pearl of great price on a plate, but my awakening had brought no instructions of the kind reported by some mystics and by some near-death experiences about what it was all going to mean for the future conduct of my life. I had an overwhelming wish to pass on the awakening to others somehow, but had received no divine commission to be a guru, and indeed hadn't a clue what to suggest, since I could scarcely recommend taking a potentially fatal dose of poison. Chapter 6. Ramakrishna and Samadhi. Excerpt from Awakening Times. Sri Ramakrishna rarely slept for more than an hour or so at night. He would pass the night sometimes in Samadhi, sometimes singing devotional songs, and sometimes chanting the Lord's name. I often saw him in Samadhi for an hour or more. In that state he could not talk in spite of repeated efforts. Regaining outer consciousness, he would say, "Look, when I am in Samadhi, I want to tell you my experiences, but at that time, I lose my power of speech." After Samadhi, he used to mutter something. It seemed to me that he was talking with somebody. I heard that in earlier years the master stayed in Samadhi most of the time. The master would go into different kinds of Samadhi at different times. Sometimes his whole body would become stiff like a log. Coming down from this state, he could easily regain normal consciousness. At other times, however, when he was absorbed in deep Samadhi, it would take a longer period for him to return to consciousness of the outer world. On such occasions, he would take a deep breath after gasping for a while, like a drowning man coming up out of water. Even after he had composed himself, he would talk like a drunkard for some time, and not all of his speech was intelligible. At that time, he would often express some small desire. "I shall eat sukta, a bitter squash curry," or "I shall smoke tobacco," and so on. And sometimes he would rub his face, moving his hands up and down. On one occasion, Sri Ramakrishna said, "One day, as I was meditating in the Kali temple, I saw in a vision the veils of Maya disappearing one after another. In another vision, the Divine Mother showed me the light of Brahman, which surpassed the light of even millions of suns together. I then saw that a luminous form emerged from that infinite light and again merged back into its source. I experienced that the formless Brahman took a form and again became formless." Oh, what superhuman power the Master had! At that time we thought it was merely a peculiar power with him, and we could not understand the nature of it. Now we realize what a wonderful power it was. Chapter 7. Narendra's Enlightenment. Excerpt from Swami Virajananda, The Life of the Swami Vivekananda by his Eastern and Western Disciples, Volume 1, Chapter 53, in the Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Nirvikalpa Samadhi came to Narendra one evening unexpectedly and with divine power. Noren was meditating in a lying posture. Suddenly he felt that there was a great light at the back of his head. It became effulgent. His mind merged in it. What then transpired in his consciousness was beyond words. The highest consciousness had come upon him, quite unawares. To those only who possess the mystical consciousness, the condition of Noren will be comprehensible. Consciousness had ascended like a flame, which swept in and out and in, all ideas and states the mind had ever known. Noren was in blessedness. As the light came to him, he seemed to pass through many spheres of being, but then, soon all was blotted out. Only Brahman was. Noren has ascended the mountaintop of realization. Everything had been quiet on that night. The other disciples were in meditation. Some were with the master, nursing him. It was all still and quiet. In a distant corner of the garden, some were singing in soft tones. The elderly Gopalda was seated in meditation in the same room with Noren. Suddenly he sprang to his feet. His mind had been thrown from the heights of thought by a strange, anxious cry, which he knew instantly to be the voice of Noren. And then there struck upon his ears the words, O Gopalda, where is my body? Where is my body? Gopalda was as if suddenly terror-struck and screamed out, Why, Noren, there it is there! He hastened to Noren and found his body lying prostrate. His body was rigid. He might have just died, judging from his lifeless appearance. His eyes were turned inwardly. Gopalda called out to the others. The disciples were anxious beyond words. They shouted Noren's name. They shook the body. They found the breath had stopped. Then they massaged his limbs and endeavored by artificial means to induce respiration, but without success. The minutes seemed hours. The suspense grew terrible. It was no longer endurable. One whispered, Is he dead? Only 2 or 3 remained with the body. The others hastened to the upper story. When the disciples entered the room of the master, he was in a state of intense calm, and his countenance was deeply serious. He seemed to have foreknowledge of what has happened. They spoke hurriedly and excitedly at one and the same time. Then Sri Ramakrishna smiled, and turning to Gopalda, he said, Let him be, let him be. He teased me long to reach that state. The master appeared in that moment as the incarnation of power itself. Assured by the words and the attitude of the Bhagavan, the disciples returned and watched over the body of Noren, confident that all would be well with him. Until 9 o'clock at night he lay in that sublime state. After that time he showed faint signs of returning to consciousness. The disciples were overjoyed. One hastened to Sri Ramakrishna with the news. The others labored in loving service over the body, stimulating it into quicker resuscitation by constant massage. It is certain that but for the effort of those about to bring him back, Noren would have remained much longer in that state. However, he came to consciousness suddenly, as if a strong force had pushed him forth. But still he was dazed for a time. Then he gave out an exclamation of rapturous joy, crying out, Oh, what has happened? The brother disciples spoke hurriedly and loudly, as if to hold his mind from reverting to that state out of which he had just come. Though physical consciousness had returned, the soul of him still had glimpses in the memory of this experience. His heart was full to overflow with ecstasy. His eyes shone with superhuman glory. He was literally radiant. His heart was too full to speak. His mind was saturated, as it were, with light. He felt lightness of the body as well. In this beatific consciousness he arose. His feet naturally took the direction towards the upper story and to the room of the master. Looking deeply into the eyes of his disciple, Sri Ramakrishna said, Now then, Mother has shown you everything. Just as the treasure is locked up in the box, so will this realization you have just had be kept under lock, and the key remains with me. Now you have work to do. When you have finished this work, the treasure box will be again unlocked, and you will know everything, even as you have just known. He then admonished him to be careful of his body for some time, and to exercise the utmost discrimination in his choice of food and companions, accepting only the purest. Chapter 8. Saint Bernard and the Transformative Word. excerpted from Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. St. Bernard gives in one of his sermons a simple, ingenuous, and obviously personal account of such privy touchings, such convincing but elusive contacts of the soul with the Absolute. "Now bear with my foolishness for a little," he says, "for I wish to tell you, as I have promised, how such events have taken place in me. It is indeed a matter of no importance, but I put myself forward only that I may be of service to you. And if you derive any benefit, I am consoled for my egotism. If not, I shall but have displayed my foolishness. I confess, then, though I say it in my foolishness, that the Word has visited me, and even very often. But though he has frequently entered into my soul, I have never at any time been sensible of the precise moment of his coming. I have felt that he was present. I remember that he has been with me. I have sometimes been able even to have a presentiment that he would come, but never to feel his coming nor his departure. For whence he came to enter my soul, or whither he went on quitting it, by what means he has made entrance or departure, I confess that I know not, even to this day. According to that which is said, nescis unde veniat, aut quo vadat. Nor is this strange, because it is to him that the psalmist has said in another place, vestigia tua non cognoscentur. It is not by the eyes that he enters, for he is without form or color that they can discern, nor by the ears, for his coming is without sound, nor by the nostrils, for it is not with the air, but with the mind that he is blended. By what avenue then has he entered? Or perhaps the fact may be that he has not entered at all, nor indeed come at all from outside, for not one of these things belongs to outside. Yet it has not come from within me, for it is good, and I know that in me dwelleth no good thing. I have ascended higher than myself, and lo, I have found the Word above me still. My curiosity has led me to descend below myself also, and yet I have found him still at a lower depth. If I have looked without myself, I have found that he is beyond that which is outside of me, and if within, he was at an inner depth still. And thus have I learned the truth of the words I have read, in ipso enim vivimus, et movemur, et sumus. Chapter 9. The Ecstasy of St. Teresa of Avila. Excerpted from Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. St. Teresa is the expert of experts in describing such conditions, so I will turn immediately to what she says of one of the highest of them, the orison of union. In the orison of union, says St. Teresa, the soul is fully awake as regards God, but wholly asleep as regards things of this world and in respect of herself. During the short time the union lasts, she is as it were deprived of every feeling, and even if she would, she could not think of any single thing. Thus she needs to employ no artifice in order to arrest the use of her understanding. It remains so stricken with inactivity that she neither knows what she loves, nor in what manner she loves, nor what she wills. In short, she is utterly dead to the things of the world, and lives solely in God. I do not even know whether in this state she has enough life left to breathe. It seems to me she has not, or at least that if she does breathe, she is unaware of it. Her intellect would fain understand something of what is going on within her, but it has so little force now that it can act in no way whatsoever. So a person who falls into a deep faint appears as if dead. Thus does God, when he raises a soul to union with himself, suspend the natural action of all her faculties. She neither sees, hears, nor understands, so long as she is united with God. But this time is always short, and it seems even shorter than it is. God establishes himself in the interior of this soul in such a way that when she returns to herself, it is wholly impossible for her to doubt that she has been in God and God in her. This truth remains so strongly impressed on her that, even though many years should pass without the condition returning, she can neither forget the favor she received nor doubt of its reality. If you, nevertheless, ask how it is possible that the soul can see and understand that she has been in God, since during the union she has neither sight nor understanding, I reply that she does not see it then, but that she sees it clearly later, after she has returned to herself, not by any vision, but by a certitude which abides with her and which God alone can give her. I knew a person who was ignorant of the truth that God's mode of being in everything must be either by presence, by power, or by essence, but who, after having received the grace of which I am speaking, believed this truth in the most unshakable manner, so much so that, having consulted a half-learned man, who was as ignorant on this point as she had been before she was enlightened, when he replied that God is in us only by grace, she disbelieved his reply, so sure she was of the true answer. And when she came to ask wiser doctors, they confirmed her in her belief, which much consoled her. But how, you will repeat, can one have such certainty in respect to what one does not see? This question I am powerless to answer. These are secrets of God's omnipotence which it does not appertain to me to penetrate. All that I know is that I tell the truth, and I shall never believe that any soul who does not possess this certainty has ever been really united to God. Chapter 10. Al-Ghazali. Excerpted by William James in The Varieties of Religious Experience. The science of the Sufis, says the Moslem author, aims at detaching the heart from all that is not God, and at giving to it for sole occupation the meditation of the divine being. Theory being more easy for me than practice, I read certain books until I understood all that can be learned by study and hearsay. Then I recognized that what pertains most exclusively to their method is just what no study can grasp, but only transport, ecstasy, and the transformation of the soul. How great, for example, is the difference between knowing the definitions of health, of satiety, with their causes and conditions, and being really healthy or filled. How different to know in what drunkenness consists, as being a state occasioned by a vapor that rises from the stomach, and being drunk effectively. Without doubt, the drunken man knows neither the definition of drunkenness nor what makes it interesting for science. Being drunk, he knows nothing, whilst the physician, although not drunk, knows well in what drunkenness consists and what are its predisposing conditions. Similarly, there is a difference between knowing the nature of abstinence and being abstinent or having one's soul detached from the world. Thus I had learned what words could teach of Sufism, but what was left could be learned neither by study nor through the ears, but solely by giving oneself up to ecstasy and leading a pious life. Reflecting on my situation, I found myself tied down by a multitude of bonds, temptations on every side. Considering my teaching, I found it was impure before God. I saw myself struggling with all my might to achieve glory and to spread my name. Here follows an account of his 6 months' hesitation to break away from the conditions of his life at Baghdad, at the end of which he fell ill with a paralysis of the tongue. Then, feeling my own weakness, and having entirely given up my own will, I repaired to God, like a man in distress who has no more resources. He answered, as he answers the wretch who invokes him. My heart no longer felt any difficulty in renouncing glory, wealth, and my children. So I quitted Baghdad, and reserving from my fortune only what was indispensable for my subsistence, I distributed the rest. I went to Syria, where I remained about 2 years, with no other occupation than living in retreat and solitude, conquering my desires, combating my passions, training myself to purify my soul, to make my character perfect, to prepare my heart for meditating on God, all according to the methods of the Sufis, as I had read of them. This retreat only increased my desire to live in solitude, and to complete the purification of my heart and fit it for meditation. But the vicissitudes of the times, the affairs of the family, the need of subsistence, changed in some respects my primitive resolve, and interfered with my plans for a purely solitary life. I had never yet found myself completely in ecstasy, save in a few single hours. Nevertheless, I kept the hope of attaining this state. Every time that the accidents led me astray, I sought to return, and in this situation I spent 10 years. During this solitary state, things were revealed to me which it is impossible either to describe or to point out. I recognized for certain that the Sufis are assuredly walking in the path of God, both in their acts and in their inaction, whether internal or external. They are illumined by the light which proceeds from the prophetic source. The first condition for a Sufi is to purge his heart entirely of all that is not God. The next key of the contemplative life consists in the humble prayers which escape from the fervent soul, and in the meditations on God, in which the heart is swallowed up entirely. But in reality, this is only the beginning of the Sufi life, the end of Sufism being total absorption in God. The intuitions and all that precede are, so to speak, only the threshold for those who enter. From the beginning, revelations take place in so flagrant a shape that the Sufis see before them, whilst wide awake, the angels and the souls of the prophets. They hear their voices and obtain their favors. Then the transport rises from the perception of forms and figures to a degree which escapes all expression, and which no man may seek to give an account of, without his words involving sin. Whosoever has had no experience of the transport knows of the true nature of prophetism nothing but the name. He may meanwhile be sure of its existence, both by experience and by what he hears the Sufis say. As there are men endowed only with the sensitive faculty who reject what is offered them in the way of objects of the pure understanding, so there are intellectual men who reject and avoid the things perceived by the prophetic faculty. A blind man can understand nothing of colors, save what he has learned by narration and hearsay. Yet God has brought prophetism near to men in giving them all a state analogous to it in its principal characters. This state is sleep. If you were to tell a man who was himself without experience of such a phenomenon, that there are people who at times swoon away so as to resemble dead men, and who, in dreams, yet perceive things that are hidden, he would deny it and give his reasons. Nevertheless, his arguments would be refuted by actual experience. Wherefore, just as the understanding is a stage of human life in which an eye opens to discern various intellectual objects uncomprehended by sensation, just so in the prophetic the sight is illumined by a light which uncovers hidden things and objects, which the intellect fails to reach. The chief properties of prophetism are perceptible only during the transport by those who embrace the Sufi life. The prophet is endowed with qualities to which you possess nothing analogous, and which consequently you cannot possibly understand. How should you know their true nature, since one knows only what one can comprehend? But the transport which one attains by the method of the Sufis is like an immediate perception, as if one touched the objects with one's hand. Chapter 11. The Miracle of the Night Journey and Heavenly Ascension of Prophet Muhammad. Excerpt from daralifta.org. Details of the Prophet's journey is found in the vast body of hadith and sirah literature. The exact details, however, fluctuate from one text to another. There is a difference of opinion among scholars on several points of the story, such as, for instance, where the Prophet was staying when he was visited by the archangel Jibril, where he was offered the cups of milk and wine, and where the splitting of the chest took place. All narratives, however, agree that Jibril wakes Muhammad from his sleep and leads him to the Roark, a white mount, smaller than a mule and larger than a donkey, which takes him off to his journey. The Roark carries the Prophet to the farthest mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. At some point, Jibril splits open the Prophet's chest, removes his heart, and washes it with Zamzam water. He then brings a vessel made of gold containing wisdom and faith, which he empties into the Prophet's heart, and then closes up his chest. The Prophet is offered 2 cups from which to drink, one containing milk, and the other containing wine. The Prophet chooses to drink the milk. Jibril tells him, "Praise be to Allah who guided you to the fitrah, right path." From Bukhari. With Jibril as his companion, the Prophet sets off on the Roark at phenomenal speed to Al-Aqsa Mosque, where he finds Abraham, Moses, and Jesus among a company of the prophets assembled and waiting for him. The call to prayer is then made, and the Prophet is invited to lead them in prayer. This part of the journey, the Isra, represents the Prophet's horizontal journey across the visible physical world. It is distinct from the Miraj and serves as a prelude to it. The Isra contains initiation features. The sanctification and purification of the Prophet, represented by the splitting of his chest, is a necessary preliminary to his ascension to the heavens. It prepares him for the journey to another dimension beyond time and space, and opens up his heart to what he is about to see and experience. More important, it prepares him for the splendid culmination of his journey, the meeting with his Lord. The Isra is also paramount in that it is symbolic of 2 things. First, it shows Allah's grace and favor upon the Prophet. Allah chooses none but him to lead all other prophets and messengers in prayer, thereby consolidating his superior status. Second, it declares the universality of Islam and signifies that it is the seal of all other messages and laws. The next part of the journey is marked by Prophet Muhammad's ascension to the heavens. Here, all the laws of nature and the concepts of time and space as we know cease to apply, and everything the Prophet experiences and sees is beyond human comprehension. At each of the 7 heavens, the Prophet, accompanied by Jibril, encounters a gate and a watcher. At the gate of the lowest heaven, Jibril asks the gatekeeper to open the gate. The gatekeeper asks, "Who is it?" "It is Jibril," he answers. The gatekeeper says, "Who is accompanying you?" Jibril says, "It is Muhammad." The gatekeeper then says, "Has he been called?" Jibril says, "Yes." The gatekeeper says, "He is welcomed. What a wonderful visit this is." As the Prophet and his companion continue to travel upward to the other levels of heaven, the same questions are asked by the gatekeeper of each heaven, and the same responses are given. At every heaven, the Prophet encounters a prophet. In the first heaven, he meets Adam, the father of mankind. The Prophet greets Adam with the greetings of peace. Delighted to see the greatest of his descendants, Adam replies, "Welcome, my son. Welcome, O Prophet of Allah." Gabriel then takes the prophet up to the other heavens where he encounters Jesus and Yahya in the second heaven, Yusuf in the third heaven, Idris in the fourth heaven, Harun in the fifth heaven, Musa in the sixth heaven, and finally Ibrahim, the father of prophets, in the seventh heaven. In each heaven, Prophet Muhammad greets the prophet residing in it with greetings of peace, and he is greeted back with, "Welcome, dear brother, and welcome, O Prophet of Allah." During this heavenly journey, Prophet Muhammad sees several signs of Allah. He is shown Bat al-Mamur, the Qibla of the angels, that sits above the Kaaba, and scenes from paradise and hell. In hell, he sees people being tortured for sins such as fornication, usury, backbiting, and misappropriating the property of orphans. In paradise, the prophet sees people enjoying the wondrous rewards promised to them by Allah in recompense for their faith and good deeds. The wonders he sees in paradise go beyond what the eye has ever seen, what the ear has ever heard, and what the mind has ever conceived. Jibril then escorts the prophet to his next destination through the seventh heaven to the uppermost boundary, Sidrat al-Muntaha, the lot tree, whose fruits are as big as jugs and its leaves as big as elephant ears. He sees 4 rivers flowing out from beneath the tree, 2 visible ones and 2 hidden ones. The prophet asks, "What are these, O Jibril?" He replies, "As for the hidden ones, they are 2 rivers of paradise. The visible ones are the Nile and the Euphrates." At Sidrat al-Muntaha, Jibril asks Muhammad to proceed alone. No one from among all of Allah's creation has ever gone beyond Sidrat al-Muntaha, for beyond it lies the throne of Allah, the Almighty. Prophet Muhammad proceeds alone and reaches the climax of his journey. He stands in the presence of Allah the Almighty at a distance of 2 bow lengths away or even closer. We do not have the details of the exchange that went on between Allah and his beloved prophet. What we do know, however, is that during this meeting, Allah commissioned Prophet Muhammad and his community with prayer, the cornerstone of Islam, after monotheism. Allah tells him, "I have placed a religious duty on you and your community of 50 prayers every day and every night." On his descent through the heavens, Prophet Muhammad meets Musa once more, who asks him about the commission he received from his Lord. When Musa learns about the number of prayers enjoined upon the community of Muhammad, he advises him to go back and implore Allah to reduce the number. The prophet hurries back until he reaches the tree and asks Allah to lighten the burden of his community. Allah agrees and reduces the number of prayers. When the prophet returns to Musa and informs him of what has transpired, he is again advised to return to his Lord and ask for a further reduction. The prophet continues to go back and forth between Musa and his Lord until Allah reduces the number to 5 daily prayers, with each one counting as 10. Prophet Muhammad's journey through the heavens comes to an end. He descends from the heavens to Jerusalem, untethers the buraq, mounts the saddle, and goes back to Mecca. The prophet wastes no time to inform the people of his journey and encounter with Allah, in the hope of winning the hearts of the idolaters over to Allah. The very next morning he recounts his journey to the people of Mecca. He is at once ridiculed and accused of lying. To test the veracity of his wondrous claims, the people ask him to describe Al-Aqsa Mosque, which he does in detail. They ask him to describe the caravans he saw en route, and he says, "I saw the caravan of so-and-so. They had lost one of their camels and were searching for it." In spite of all the details attesting to his truthfulness, the idolaters continue to mock him for his story and accuse him of lying and insanity. Chapter 12. The Abstract Sound. Excerpt from The Mysticism of Sound and Music by Inayat Rehmat Khan. Abstract sound is called Saut-i Sarmad by the Sufis. All space is filled with it. The vibrations of this sound are too fine to be either audible or visible to the material ears or eyes, since it is even difficult for the eyes to see the form and color of the ethereal vibrations on the external plane. It was the Saut-i Sarmad, the sound of the abstract plane, which Muhammad heard in the cave of Gadi Hira when he became lost in his divine ideal. The Quran refers to this sound in the words, "Be, and all became." Moses heard this very sound on Mount Sinai when in communion with God, and the same word was audible to Christ when absorbed in his heavenly Father in the wilderness. Shiva heard the same Anahad Nada during his Samadhi in the cave of the Himalayas. The flute of Krishna is symbolic of the same sound. This sound is the source of all revelation to the masters, to whom it is revealed from within. It is because of this that they know and teach one and the same truth. The Sufi knows of the past, present, and future, and about all things in life, by being able to know the direction of sound. Every aspect of one's being in which sound manifests has a peculiar effect upon life, for the activity of vibrations has a special effect in every direction. The knower of the mystery of sound knows the mystery of the whole universe. Whoever has followed the strains of this sound has forgotten all earthly distinctions and differences, and has reached that goal of truth in which all the blessed ones of God unite. Space is within the body as well as around it. In other words, the body is in the space, and the space is in the body. This being the case, the sound of the abstract is always going on within, around, and about man. Man does not hear it as a rule, because his consciousness is entirely centered in his material existence. Man becomes so absorbed in his experiences in the external world through the medium of the physical body that space, with all its wonders of light and sound, appears to him blank. This can be easily understood by studying the nature of color. There are many colors that are quite distinct by themselves, yet when mixed with others of still brighter hue, they become altogether eclipsed. Even bright colors embroidered with gold, silver, diamonds, or pearls serve merely as a background to the dazzling embroidery. So it is with the abstract sound compared with the sounds of the external world. The limited volume of earthly sounds is so concrete that it dims the effect of the sound of the abstract to the sense of hearing, although in comparison to it the sounds of the earth are like that of a whistle to a drum. When the abstract sound is audible, all other sounds become indistinct to the mystic. The sound of the abstract is called Anahad in the Vedas, meaning unlimited sound. The Sufis name it Sarmad, which suggests the idea of intoxication. The word intoxication is here used to signify upliftment, the freedom of the soul from its earthly bondage. Those who are able to hear the Saut-i Sarmad and meditate on it are relieved from all worries, anxieties, sorrows, fears, and diseases, and the soul is freed from captivity in the senses and in the physical body. The soul of the listener becomes the all-pervading consciousness, and his spirit becomes the battery which keeps the whole universe in motion. Some train themselves to hear the Saut-i Sarmad in the solitude on the seashore, on the riverbank, and in the hills and dales. Others attain it while sitting in the caves of the mountains, or when wandering constantly through forests and deserts, keeping themselves in the wilderness apart from the haunts of men. Yogis and ascetics blow sing, a horn, or shankha, a shell, which awakens in them this inner tone. Dervishes play nai, or algosa, a double flute, for the same purpose. The bells and gongs in the churches and temples are meant to suggest to the thinker the same sacred sound, and thus lead him towards the inner life. This sound develops through 10 different aspects because of its manifestation through 10 different tubes of the body. It sounds like thunder, the roaring of the sea, the jingling of bells, running the water, the buzzing of bees, the twittering of sparrows, the vina, the whistle, or the sound of shankha, until it finally becomes hu, the most sacred of all sounds. This sound, hu, is the beginning and the end of all sounds, be they from man, bird, beast, or thing. A careful study will prove this fact, which can be realized by listening to the sound of the steam engine or of a mill, while the echo of bells or gongs gives a typical illustration of the sound hu. The Supreme Being has been called by various names in different languages, but the mystics have known him as Hu, the natural name, not man-made, the only name of the nameless, which all nature constantly proclaims. The sound Hu is most sacred. The mystics call Ism-i-Azam, the name of the Most High, for it is the origin and end of every sound, as well as the background of each word. The word Hu is the spirit of all sounds and of all words, and is hidden within them all, as the spirit in the body. It does not belong to any language, but no language can help belonging to it. This alone is the true name of God, a name that no people and no religion can claim as their own. This word is not only uttered by human beings, but is repeated by animals and birds. All things and beings proclaim this name of the Lord, for every activity of life expresses distinctly or indistinctly this very sound. This is the word mentioned in the Bible as existing before the light came into being. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The mystery of Hu is revealed to the Sufi who journeys through the path of initiation. Truth, the knowledge of God, is called by a Sufi Haq. If we divide the word Haq into 2 parts, its assonant sounds become hu, ek. Hu signifying God or truth, and ek in Hindustani meaning one, and both together expressing one God and one truth. Hakikat in Arabic means the essential truth. Hakim means master, and Hakim means knower, all of which words express the essential characteristics of life. Al-Haq is the sacred word that the Vairagis, the adepts of India, use as their sacred chant. In the word Al-Haq are expressed 2 words, Al, meaning the, and Haq, truth, both words together expressing God, the source from which all comes. The sound Hu becomes limited in the word Ham, for the letter M closes the lips. This word in Hindustani expresses limitation because Ham means I or we, both of which words signify ego. The word Hamsa is the sacred word of the yogis which illumines the ego with the light of reality. The word Huma in the Persian language stands for a fabulous bird. There is a belief that if the Huma bird sits for a moment on the head of anybody, it is a sign that he will become a king. Its true explanation is that when a man's thoughts so evolve that they break all limitation, then he becomes as a king. It is the limitation of language that it can only describe the Most High as something like a king. It is said in the old traditions that Zoroaster was born of a Huma tree. This explains the words in the Bible, "Except a man be born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God." In the word Huma, Hu represents spirit, and the word Ma in Arabic means water. In English, the word human explains 2 facts which are characteristics of humanity. Hu means God, and man means mind, which word comes from the Sanskrit mana, mind being the ordinary man. The two words united represent the idea of the God-conscious man. In other words, Hu, God, is in all things and beings, but it is man by whom he is known. Human, therefore, may be said to mean God-conscious, God-realized, or God-man. The word hamd means praise, Hamid, praiseworthy, and Mohammed, praiseful. The name of the Prophet of Islam was significant of his attitude to God. Hur in Arabic means the beauties of the heaven. Its real meaning is the expression of heavenly beauty. Zuhur in Arabic means manifestation, especially that of God in nature. Ahura Mazda is the name of God known to the Zoroastrians. This first word, Ahura, suggests Hu, upon which the whole name is built. All of these examples signify the origin of God in the word Hu, and the life of God in everything and being. Hayy in Arabic means everlasting, and Hayat means life, both of which words signify the everlasting nature of God. The word Hual suggests the idea of omnipresence, and Huva is the origin of the name of Eve, which is symbolic of manifestation, as Adam is symbolic of life. They are named in Sanskrit Purusha and Prakriti. Jehovah was originally Yahuwah, Yah suggesting the word O, and Hu standing for God, while the Ah represents manifestation. Hu is the origin of sound, but when the sound first takes shape on the external plane, it becomes A. Therefore, Aleph, or Alpha, is considered to be the first expression of Hu, the original word. The Sanskrit alphabet, as well as that of most other languages, begins with the letter A, as does the name of God in several tongues. The word A therefore expresses in English one, or first, and the sign of Aleph expresses the meaning one as well as first. The letter A is pronounced without the help of the teeth or tongue, and in Sanskrit A always means without. The A is raised to the surface when the tongue rises and touches the roof of the mouth when pronouncing the letter L, Lam, and the sound ends in M, Mim, the pronunciation of which closes the lips. These three essential letters of the alphabet are brought together as the mystery in the Quran. With A deepened by Ain, the word ilm is formed, which means knowledge. Alim comes from the same and means knower. Alam means state or condition, the existence which is known. When Aleph, the first, and Lam, the central letters, are brought together, they make the word al, which means the in Arabic. In English, all suggests the meaning of the entire or absolute nature of existence. The word Allah, which in Arabic means God, if divided into three parts, may be interpreted as the one who comes from nothing. El or Allah has the same meaning as Allah. The words found in the Bible, Eloi, Elohim, and Hallelujah, are related to the word Allahu. The words Om, Omen, Amen, and Amin, which are spoken in all houses of prayer, are of the same origin. A in the commencement of the word expresses the beginning, and M in the midst signifies end. N, the final letter, is the re-echo of M, for M naturally ends in a nasal sound, the producing of which sound signifies life. In the word Ahad, which means God, the only being, two meanings are involved by assonance. A in Sanskrit means without, and Hud in Arabic means limitation. It is from the same source that the words Wadat, Wadaniyat, Hadi, Hada, and Hidayat all come. Wadat means the consciousness of self alone. Wadaniyat is the knowledge of self. Hadi, the guide. Hada, to guide. Hidayat means guidance. The more a Sufi listens to Saut-i Sarmad, the sound of the abstract, the more his consciousness becomes free from all the limitations of life. The soul floats above the physical and mental plane without any special effort on man's part, which shows its calm and peaceful state. A dreamy look comes into his eyes, and his countenance becomes radiant. He experiences the unearthly joy and rapture of wajd, or ecstasy. When ecstasy overwhelms him, he is neither conscious of the physical existence nor of the mental. This is the heavenly wine to which all Sufi poets refer, which is totally unlike the momentary intoxications of this mortal plane. A heavenly bliss then springs in the heart of a Sufi. His mind is purified from sin, his body from all impurities, and a pathway is opened for him towards the world unseen. He begins to receive inspirations, intuitions, impressions, and revelations without the least effort on his part. He is no longer dependent upon a book or a teacher, for divine wisdom, the light of his soul, the Holy Spirit, begins to shine upon him. As Sharif says, I, by the light of soul, realize that the beauty of the heavens and the grandeur of the earth are the echo of thy magic flute. Chapter 13. The Tibetan Book of the Dead. Excerpt from Evans-Wentz, Oxford edition. Instructions on the symptoms of death, or the first stage of the Chikai Bardo, the primary clear light seen at the moment of death. The first, the setting face to face with the clear light during the intermediate state of the moments of death, is: here some there may be who have listened much to religious instructions, yet not recognized, and some who, though recognizing, are nevertheless weak in familiarity. But all classes of individuals who have received the practical teachings called guides will, if this be applied to them, be set face to face with the fundamental clear light, and without any intermediate state, they will obtain the unborn Dharmakaya by the great perpendicular path. The manner of application is: it is best if the guru from whom the deceased received guiding instructions can be had. But if the guru cannot be obtained, then a brother of the faith, or if the latter is also unobtainable, then a learned man of the same faith, or should all these be unobtainable, then a person who can read correctly and distinctly ought to read this many times over. Thereby the deceased will be put in mind of what he had previously heard of the setting face to face, and will at once come to recognize that fundamental light, and undoubtedly obtain liberation. As regards the time for the application of these instructions, when the expiration bath ceased, the vital force will have sunk into the nerve center of wisdom, and the knower will be experiencing the clear light of the natural condition. Then the vital force being thrown backwards and flying downwards through the right and left nerves, the intermediate state momentarily dawns. The above directions should be applied before the vital force hath rushed into the left nerve, after first having traversed the navel nerve center. The time ordinarily necessary for this motion of the vital force is as long as the inspiration is still present, or about the time required for eating a meal. Then the manner of the application of the instructions is: when the breathing is about to cease, it is best if the transference hath been applied efficiently. If the application hath been inefficient, then address the deceased thus: O nobly born so-and-so by name, the time hath now come for thee to seek the path in reality. Thy breathing is about to cease. Thy guru hath set thee face to face before with the clear light, and now thou art about to experience it in its reality in the bardo state, wherein all things are like the void and cloudless sky, and the naked spotless intellect is like unto a transparent vacuum without circumference or center. At this moment, know thou thyself, and abide in that state. I too, at this time, am setting thee face to face. Having read this, repeat it many times in the ear of the person dying, even before the expiration hath ceased, so as to impress it on the mind of the dying one. If the expiration is about to cease, turn the dying one over on the right side, which posture is called the lying posture of a lion. The throbbing of the arteries on the right and left side of the throat is to be pressed. If the person dying be disposed to sleep, or if the sleeping state advances, that should be arrested, and the arteries pressed gently but firmly. Thereby the vital force will not be able to return from the median nerve, and will be sure to pass out through the Brahmanic aperture. Now the real setting face to face is to be applied. At this moment, the first glimpsing of the bardo of the clear light of reality, which is the infallible mind of the Dharmakaya, is experienced by all sentient beings. The interval between the cessation of the expiration and the cessation of the inspiration is the time during which the vital force remaineth in the median nerve. The common people call this the state wherein the consciousness principle hath fainted away. The duration of this state is uncertain. It dependeth upon the constitution, good or bad, and the state of the nerves and vital force. In those who have had even a little practical experience of the firm, tranquil state of dhyana, and in those who have sound nerves, this state continueth for a long time. In the setting face to face, the repetition of the above address to the deceased is to be persisted in until a yellowish liquid beginneth to appear from the various apertures of the bodily organs of the deceased. In those who have led an evil life, and in those of unsound nerves, the above state endureth only so long as would take to snap a finger. Again, in some, it endureth as long as the time taken for the eating of a meal. In various tantras, it is said that this state of swoon endureth for about 3½ days. Most other religious treatises say for 4 days, and that this setting face to face with the clear light ought to be persevered in during the whole time. The manner of applying these directions is, if when dying one be by one's own self capable of diagnosing the symptoms of death, use of the knowledge should have been made ere this. If the dying person be unable to do so, then either the guru or a shisha or a brother in the faith with whom the one dying was very intimate should be kept at hand, who will vividly impress upon the one dying the symptoms of death as they appear in due order, repeatedly saying at first thus, "Now the symptoms of earth sinking into water are come." When all the symptoms of death are about to be completed, then enjoin upon the one dying this resolution, speaking in a low tone of voice in the ear, "O nobly born," or, if it be a priest, "O venerable sir, let not thy mind be distracted." If it be a brother in the faith or some other person, then call him by name and say thus, "O nobly born, that which is called death being come to thee now, resolve thus, O this now is the hour of death. By taking advantage of this death, I will so act for the good of all sentient beings, peopling the illimitable expanse of the heavens, as to obtain the perfect Buddhahood. by resolving on love and compassion towards them, and by directing my entire effort to the soul perfection. Shaping the thoughts thus, especially at this time when the Dharmakaya of clear light in the state after death can be realized for the benefit of all sentient beings, know that thou art in that state, and resolve that thou wilt obtain the best boon of the state of the great symbol in which thou art, as follows. Even if I cannot realize it, yet will I know this bardo, and mastering the great body of union in bardo, will appear in whatever shape will benefit all beings whomsoever. I will serve all sentient beings, infinite in number, as are the limits of the sky. Keeping thyself unseparated from this resolution, thou shouldst try to remember whatever devotional practices thou went accustomed to perform during thy lifetime. In saying this, the reader shall put his lips close to the ear, and shall repeat it distinctly, clearly impressing it upon the dying person so as to prevent his mind from wandering even for a moment. After the expiration hath completely ceased, press the nerve of sleep firmly, and a lama, or a person higher or more learned than thyself, impress in these words thus: Reverend Sir, now that thou art experiencing the fundamental clear light, try to abide in that state which now thou art experiencing. And also, in the case of any other person, the reader shall set him face to face thus: O nobly born so-and-so, listen. Now thou art experiencing the radiance of the clear light of pure reality. Recognize it. O nobly born, thy present intellect, in real nature void, not formed into anything as regards characteristics or color, naturally void, is the very reality, the all-good. Thine own intellect, which is now voidness, yet not to be regarded as of the voidness of nothingness, but as being the intellect itself, unobstructed, shining, thrilling, and blissful, is the very consciousness, the all-good Buddha. Thine own consciousness, not formed into anything, in reality void, and the intellect, shining and blissful, these two are inseparable. The union of them is the Dharmakaya state of perfect enlightenment. Thine own consciousness, shining, void, and inseparable from the great body of radiance, hath no birth nor death, and is the immutable light, Buddha, Amitabha. Knowing this is sufficient. Recognizing the voidness of thine own intellect to be Buddhahood, and looking upon it as being thine own consciousness, is to keep thyself in the state of the divine mind of the Buddha. Repeat this distinctly and clearly 3 or even 7 times. That will recall to the mind of the dying one the former, i.e., when living, setting face to face by the Guru. Secondly, it will cause the naked consciousness to be recognized as the clear light. And thirdly, recognizing one's own self thus, one becometh permanently united with the Dharmakaya, and liberation will be certain. Chapter 14. Conclusion. Excerpted from The Skeptical Yogi. Although Yogananda's description about cosmic consciousness is effusive and filled with sonorous evocations about the divine, it seems obvious that the experience was transformative. What makes his account so compelling, even if he can be pardoned for some of his turgid prose, is that it dovetails with other mystics from around the world who have had similar out-of-body ecstasies. Yogananda's momentous rapture reminds one of modern NDE accounts, where dying patients are transported to a heavenly realm and enter a dark tunnel and see a scintillating light, and more. While we may doubt or question how Yogananda ultimately interpreted his experience of cosmic consciousness, I am of the strong opinion that Yogananda did indeed have a mystical vision, and that his guru was the chief catalyst behind it. I don't say this lightly or to elevate Yogananda's spiritual status, but only to highlight what consciousness is capable of producing under the right conditions and given the right cues. This doesn't mean by extension that such illuminations were not brain-induced or beyond the ken of neuroscience to understand them. Rather, it is to realize that extraordinary states of awareness are possible, and that yoga, meditation, prayer, and other methods are powerful tools to unleash hidden corridors of the human mind. Yogananda provides us with the contextual setting for where, when, how, and why he was ready for such a transcendent illumination. First, he had been thwarted in his efforts to run away and meet Himalayan masters. Second, he had met his guru and began regular and guided sadhana. Third, he was slightly reprimanded by Ram Gopal, the sleepless saint, for his continued pilgrimages when what he needed was back at his home ashram. These factors, plus Yogananda's intense faith and desire, served as tipping points in his spiritual evolution. His emotional and mental kindling were preset, and thus, when Sri Yukteswar tapped him on the chest above his heart, it served as an immediate unleashing of his spiritual potential. Yogananda, to his credit, provides us with enough physical clues about what transpired that we can better understand how such a wondrous experience could happen, and why others in different mystical traditions may have had similar excursions. Notice that right after his guru touches him, Yogananda talks about how his body freezes up, which is so intense that he became immovably rooted. This feeling of physical paralysis is a common precursor in those undergoing a mystical ecstasy. The feeling of numbness in the body, but specifically in the peripheral nervous system, is, according to Indian sages, a preliminary acid test which confirms that the numinous exteriorization is genuine. Yogananda then mentions that breath was drawn out of my lungs as if by some huge magnet. Soul and mind instantly lost their physical bondage and streamed out like a fluid piercing light from my every pore. This sounds very reminiscent of what happens when one has a near-death experience, though his description is more vivid and detailed, and most likely has been garnished in the final editing process before publication. His account also sounds remarkably similar to reports from those who have ingested psychedelic drugs, such as LSD-25, mescaline, MDMA, ketamine, and DMT. Aldous Huxley, in his groundbreaking tome The Doors of Perception, 1954, writing less than a decade after Autobiography of a Yogi was published, speaks in enraptured tones after ingesting mescaline. I continued to look at the flowers, and in their living light I seemed to detect the qualitative equivalent of breathing, but of a breathing without returns to a starting point, with no recurrent ebbs, but only a repeated flow from beauty to heightened beauty, from deeper to ever deeper meaning. Words like grace and transfiguration came to my mind, and this, of course, was what, among other things, they stood for. My eyes traveled from the rose to the carnation, and from that feathery incandescence to the smooth scrolls of sentient amethyst, which were the iris. The beatific vision, Sat, Chit, Ananda, being, awareness, bliss. For the first time I understood, not on the verbal level, not by inchoate hints or at a distance, but precisely and completely what those prodigious syllables referred to. And then I remembered a passage I had read in one of Suzuki's essays. What is the Dharma body of the Buddha? The Dharma body of the Buddha is another way of saying mind, suchness, the void, the Godhead. The question is asked in a Zen monastery by an earnest and bewildered novice, and with the prompt irrelevance of one of the Marx brothers, the master answers, the hedge at the bottom of the garden. And the man who realizes this truth, the novice dubiously inquires, what, may I ask, is he? Groucho gives him a whack over the shoulders with his staff and answers, a golden-haired lion. It had been, when I read it, only a vaguely pregnant piece of nonsense. Now it was all as clear as day, as evident as Euclid. Of course the Dharma body of the Buddha was the hedge at the bottom of the garden. At the same time, and no less obviously, it was these flowers. It was anything that I, or rather the blessed not I, released for a moment from my throttling embrace, cared to look at. The books, for example, with which my study walls were lined. Like the flowers, they glowed when I looked at them, with brighter colors, a profounder significance. Red books like rubies, emerald books, books bound in white jade, books of agate, of aquamarine, of yellow topaz, lapis lazuli books whose color was so intense, so intrinsically meaningful, that they seemed to be on the point of leaving the shelves, to thrust themselves more insistently on my attention. Gerald Edelman, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist, quotes Emily Dickinson in his preface to Wider Than the Sky, The Phenomenal Gift of Consciousness, where she shares a vision of consciousness that resonates with mystics east and west. The brain is wider than the sky, for, put them side by side, the one the other will contain, with ease, and you beside. The brain is deeper than the sea, for, hold them blue to blue, the one the other will absorb, as sponges buckets do. The brain is just the weight of God, for, heft them pound for pound, and they will differ, if they do, as syllable from sound. Yogananda is in good company when he euphorically writes, the Spirit of God, I realized, is exhaustless bliss. His body is countless tissues of light. A swelling glory within me began to envelop towns, continents, the earth, solar and stellar systems, tenuous nebulae, and floating universes. The entire cosmos, gently luminous, like a city seen afar at night, glimmered within the infinitude of my being. The sharply etched global outlines faded somewhat at the farthest edges. There I could see a mellow radiance, ever undiminished. It was indescribably subtle. The planetary pictures were formed of a grosser light. The skeptic, who has not had such experiences, will undoubtedly look askance at such narratives, impugning their veridicality with the tiresome trope that they are just brain hallucinations, forgetting in the process that even our own waking state is the product of symphonic neural activity. What we take to be real at any moment is also predicated upon cerebral processes for which we have no direct access. Therefore, given how little we know about consciousness and how, why it emerges, it behooves us not to prematurely dismiss mystical encounters and what they can teach us about our evolutionary heritage.